The laughter started as a ripple and swelled into a wave that crashed over Maya Rodriguez like ice water. She stood frozen at the edge of the dance floor, her carefully chosen lavender dress suddenly feeling like a spotlight instead of the confidence boost she'd hoped for. Someone had turned up the music, someone had pulled her into the center of the room, and now someone, no, multiple someones, were pointing, whispering, their phones already out and recording. This was supposed to be a celebration. Her cousin Jennifer's wedding, a day of joy and family and new beginnings. Maya had driven 6 hours to be here, had spent her last paycheck on a gift, had practiced her smile in the mirror that morning because she promised herself this time would be different. This time, she wouldn't let the weight of other people's judgment crush her spirit. But as the cruel laughter echoed through the decorated hall, as she saw her aunt look away and her own mother's face flush with embarrassment, Maya felt that familiar darkness closing in. The one that whispered she didn't belong anywhere, least of all in a room full of people who could barely hide their disgust. Her hands trembled as she turned to leave, desperate to escape before the tears came, before she gave them more ammunition for their entertainment. The exit seemed impossibly far away, a lifetime's journey through a gauntlet of mocking faces. She took one step, then another, her vision blurring. That's when he moved. A man she'd noticed earlier, tall, with kind eyes and a little girl clutching his hand, stepped directly into her path. Not to block her escape, but to stand beside her. He turned to face the crowd, his daughter looking up with confusion that quickly turned to determination, mimicking her father's protective stance. The laughter faltered, stuttered, died. I believe they were playing this song for dancing, the man said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. Would you do me the honor? Maya couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She could only stare at this stranger who had just thrown himself between her and the wolves. My daddy's the best dancer, the little girl announced proudly, her voice belt clear in the silence. He taught me. He can teach you too, if you want. The man, she would later learn his name was James Mitchell, extended his hand with such gentle courtesy that something inside Maya's chest cracked open. Not broken, but breaking free. His daughter, Sophie, barely 7 years old with wild curls and a gap-toothed smile, grabbed Maya's other hand without hesitation. I'm Sophie, she declared. That dress is so pretty. Purple's my favorite color. Well, purple and also sparkly things, but mostly purple. James met Maya's eyes, and she saw something there she hadn't seen directed at her in longer than she could remember. Simple human kindness, with no agenda, no judgment, no pity. Just kindness. You don't have to, Maya whispered, though her hand was already reaching for his. I know, James said softly. But I'd really like to dance with someone who has the courage to show up and be herself, even when it's hard. That's the kind of person I want my daughter to know. They stepped onto the dance floor together, an unlikely trio. Sophie positioned herself between them, one small hand in each of theirs, giggling as they swayed to the music. James moved with easy grace, never making Maya feel clumsy or self-conscious, adjusting his steps to match hers, including Sophie in every turn and spin. Other couples began to join them, the spell of cruelty broken, though Maya barely noticed. She was caught in this moment, in this unexpected sanctuary. I lost my wife 2 years ago, James said quietly as they danced, Sophie now twirling on her own. Nearby. Cancer. Fast and brutal and unfair. You know what I learned. That kindness is the only thing that matters. Everything else, what we look like, what we own, who we impress, it's all just noise. But kindness, that echoes forever. Maya felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for once they weren't tears of shame. People have been cruel to me my whole life, she admitted. Sometimes I wonder if they're right. If there's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you, James said firmly. But there's something very wrong with people who find entertainment in someone else's pain. My Sophie's going to grow up in a world full of people like that. But she's also going to grow up knowing that one person standing up can change everything. You gave me a chance to teach her that tonight. I didn't do anything, Maya protested. You showed up. You kept your head up. And when they tried to tear you down, you were still standing. James smiled. That's everything. The song ended, and another began. Sophie rushed back, breathless and beaming. Can we dance more? Please. This is the most fun I've had at a boring grown-up party ever. James laughed, a warm sound that seemed to light something inside Maya's chest. What do you say? He asked. Should we give the people a show? For the next hour, the three of them commanded the dance floor. Sophie made up increasingly elaborate moves that had both adults laughing until their sides ached. James proved to be exactly as good a dancer as his daughter had promised, and more importantly, he made Maya feel like she belonged there. Not despite her size, not because of pity, but simply because she was a person deserving of joy and connection. Other guests approached throughout the evening. First a teenager with tears in her eyes, thanking Maya for her courage, admitting she'd struggled with her own body image. Then an elderly man who shook James's hand and said the world needed more fathers like him. A group of bridesmaids, sheepish and apologetic, offered genuine smiles and invitations to join them. Even Jennifer, the bride, found Maya during a quiet moment. "I'm so sorry," she said, and she meant it. "Some of those people, they're not my friends anymore. Not after tonight. What James did, what you did by staying, it reminded me what this day is supposed to be about. Love, acceptance, family." But it was later, as the evening wound down and guests began to leave, that the real magic happened. Sophie had fallen asleep on a chair, her head on her father's jacket. James and Maya stood outside under a sky full of stars, the muffled sounds of celebration still floating from inside. "I teach at an elementary school," James said. "Third grade. Every year, I see kids learning either kindness or cruelty, usually from watching adults. Tonight, Sophie saw both. But more importantly, she saw what it looks like to choose kindness, even when it's hard, even when it would be easier to look away." "You didn't have to do that," Maya said for the second time that night. "Yes, I did," James replied. "Because 2 years ago, when my world fell apart, when I was drowning in grief and terrified I couldn't raise Sophie alone, people showed up for me. Strangers brought meals. Neighbors picked Sophie up from school. A woman I barely knew organized a meal train that fed us for 6 months. They didn't have to. But they did. And they saved us." He turned to face Maya fully, his expression serious but warm. "Kindness isn't random. It's a choice. It's standing up when sitting down would be easier. It's seeing someone hurting and deciding to hurt with them, to lighten their load, even just for a moment. You deserved that tonight. Everyone deserves that always." Maya felt something shifting inside her. Some fundamental change she couldn't quite name. "I've spent so much of my life trying to be invisible," she admitted. "Trying not to take up space, not to be noticed, not to be a burden. I'm so tired of making myself small." "Then don't," James said simply. "Take up space. Be noticed. Be yourself, gloriously and unapologetically. And when people try to tear you down for it, remember tonight. Remember that there are people like Sophie and me out there, people who see your worth, who celebrate your existence." They exchanged numbers before parting ways, with Sophie waking just long enough to insist on a hug. Maya drove home that night with a heart that felt strangely light, as if something heavy she'd carried for years had finally been set down. In the weeks that followed, Maya and James became friends. Real friends, built on that foundation of mutual respect and genuine caring. Sophie declared Maya her favorite person besides her daddy, and Maya found herself laughing more, smiling more, believing more in her own worth. James never acted like her savior, he was just himself, consistently kind, reliably decent, proof that good people existed in the world. But the real gift wasn't the friendship, precious as that was. The real gift was the shift inside Maya herself. She started taking up space. She stopped apologizing for existing. She wore colors she loved instead of ones designed to help her disappear. And when she encountered cruelty, because she still did, because the world is full of small, hurt people who try to make themselves feel bigger by making others feel smaller, she remembered a man and his daughter who chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. Sometimes, one person stepping forward is all it takes to change everything. Not to fix it all, not to erase the pain, but to remind us that we are not alone, that we are worthy, that we deserve to take up space in this world. James and Sophie didn't save Maya that night at the wedding. But they showed her that she was worth saving, worth standing beside, worth defending. And sometimes, that's the greatest gift of all. The reminder that our shared humanity matters more than anything else, that kindness is never wasted, and that one moment of courage can echo forward, changing not just a single night, but an entire life.